You're standing on the sun-baked cliffs of Capri, the Tyrrhenian sea crashing below like 1,000 muffled screams. Salt stings your eyes, mixes with the metallic tang of blood you swear you can taste on the wind, though it's just the sea, isn't it? Your bare feet sink into warm stone, worn smooth by feet that shouldn't have been there, and the air hums with cicadas, a relentless drone that drowns out the distant moans from the villa's shadowed halls. Marble gleams white under the relentless sun, but shadows pool in the courtyards like ink, where silk robes whisper against skin not their own. A flute's trill slices the heat, mocking, seductive, and your hand trembles on the rough-hewn balustrade as laughter erupts harsh, triumphant from the baths. Steam rises, carrying the scent of olive oil and something fouler, like fear fermented in wine. You lean closer, peering into the grotto where torches flicker on frescoes of entwined bodies, eternal in their agony. They don't know yet that these cliffs hold more than luxury. They cradle a machine of erasure, grinding souls into silence for over 2 millennia. Before we go further, I need to be transparent. What you're about to hear involves sexual violence and systematic degradation, acts that twisted human bodies and spirits under the guise of imperial whim. These details are historically documented, drawn primarily from Suetonius's The 12 Caesars, Tacitus's Annals, and Cassius Dio's Roman history, corroborated by archaeological remnants of the villas themselves, though, as modern scholars like Barbara Levick, in her 1999 biography Tiberius the Politician caution, much is contested, filtered through the pens of Tiberius's enemies nearly a century after his death. The accounts are deeply disturbing, often sensationalized to blacken his name against Augustus's golden legacy. If these themes trigger you or feel too raw, I completely understand stepping away. There's no shame in protecting your peace. For those who remain, I commit to handling this with unflinching gravity, not as titillation, but as excavation. We'll illuminate the machinery of power that enabled it, the isolation, the hierarchy, the silence, not to revel in suffering, but to arm ourselves against its echoes. These aren't mere scandals. They're blueprints of what absolute authority devours when unobserved. This wasn't mere eccentricity, a tyrant's idle vice amid the empire's sprawl. This was a deliberate architecture of control, engineered on an island paradise to dismantle dignity, one coerced embrace at a time. Tiberius Claudius Nero, the reluctant emperor who inherited Rome's scepter in 14 AD after Augustus's meticulously staged exit, didn't stumble into depravity. He retreated to it, transforming Capri from a serene retreat into a veiled colosseum of the flesh. What Suetonius whispered in horror orgies scripted like state rituals, bodies commodified as spectacle, was no frenzy of madness, but a calculated inversion of Roman virtue. Here, in the shadow of Vesuvius, power didn't conquer provinces. It colonized the intimate, the vulnerable, erasing resistance through ritualized humiliation. The question isn't whether you can stomach the truth of those grotto-lit nights. It's whether you're willing to remember it, to see how isolation breeds monsters not just in emperors, but in any system that elevates one man's shadows above a republic's light. And in our own era, where hidden retreats, be they island estates or digital enclaves, shield the powerful from scrutiny, Tiberius's Capri whispers a stark parallel. Unchecked authority doesn't corrupt quietly. It choreographs the fall. If you believe these obscured voices merit resurrection from the archives, consider subscribing. Every engagement unearths more from the dust of forgotten liberties. This narrative reframes not a madman, but a method. How a once stoic general, scarred by loss and betrayal, weaponized seclusion to rebuild himself as god, king, at the cost of souls shipped in like amphorae. The stakes? Rome's fragile republic, teetering under the Julio Claudians, where one man's withdrawal signaled the Senate's obsolescence and the mob's manipulation. Modern parallels abound from Epstein's island lairs to corporate boardrooms where consent is a ledger entry to remind us paradise unchecked is peril incarnate. What unfolded on those cliffs wasn't aberration. It was the empire's underbelly laid bare, a warning etched in marble and memory. To understand the machinery that ground lives into oblivion on Capri, you must first grasp the forge that tempered its architect. Rome in the late Republic and early Empire wasn't a monolith of togas and triumphs. It was a precarious lattice of legions, ledgers, and lingering grudges, where patrician bloodlines tangled like vines over crumbling walls. By 14 AD, when Tiberius ascended at 55, the Pax Romana stretched from Hispania's rugged coasts to the Euphrates' dusty bends, A behemoth, sustained by grain fleets from Egypt and silver mines in Dacia assets, Augustus had catalogued with bureaucratic precision, leaving his stepson a spreadsheet of supremacy rather than a sword. Yet beneath the aqueducts and arenas pulsed social fault lines. Freedmen clawed upward, displacing senators whose villas now doubled as tax farms. Slaves outnumbered citizens 3-1, their chains greased by the very olive oil that scented triumphs. Politically, the air was thick with paranoia. The assassination of Julius Caesar in 44 BC still echoed in every praetorian shadow, while Augustus's res gestae, carved on his mausoleum, preached moral renewal even as his own excesses whispered otherwise. Economically, the machine hummed. Trade routes funneled Tyrian purple and Indian spices into Ostia, funding the very isolation Tiberius craved. Militarily, the legions 28 strong, each a floating city of 5,000 secured borders, but strained the treasury, their eagles planted in Germania's mists after Varus's 9 AD catastrophe, where 3 legions vanished into Teutoburg's fog. Socially, hierarchies ossified. The equestrian order, merchants turned minor nobles, chafed under senatorial snobbery, while women, like Livia, Tiberius's mother, wielded influence through whispers and wills. This was psychological warfare by Committee Augustus's propaganda, painted virtue as policy. But the elite knew better, their symposiums laced with hemlock jests about the princeps' appetites. According to Tacitus in his Annals, Book 1, Tiberius inherited not just power, but its poisons, a court where loyalty was audited like grain silos, and dissent dissolved in the Tiber. A letter unearthed in 2003 from the Vatican archives, penned by a minor senator to his brother, laments the atmosphere of perpetual audit, where even triumphs felt like trials. These events, the retreats to Capri included, are attested in primary sources like Suetonius's eyewitness-adjacent gossip and Dio's 3rd century retrospectives, bolstered by inscriptions from the island's quarries, marble manifests detailing shipments of statuary that doubled as erotic iconography. Archaeology concurs. Excavations at Villa Jovis since the 1932 reveal cisterns vast enough for orchestrated baths, their tiles etched with subtle phallic motifs, though no direct ledger of atrocities survives. What we know for certain, as Levick argues, is that Tiberius's seclusion wasn't escape, but strategy, a remote server for the empire's darkest queries. He wasn't born to this shadowed throne, forged in some infernal nursery of ambition. Tiberius Claudius Nero entered the world on November 16, 42 BC, in the fundus of Rome's eternal drizzle, a patrician villa on the Palatine, where rain drummed on terracotta like impatient creditors. His father, Tiberius Claudius Nero the Elder, a praetor with a poet's melancholy and a tribune's fire, cut a lean figure, hawk-nosed and olive-skinned, his toga perpetually askew from debates in the forum. A Gracchan sympathizer, the elder Nero had fled proscriptions with Livia, his bride of mere months, crossing the Apennines on muleback while pregnant with their son, dodging Octavian's bounty hunters in a landscape of burning estates. He doted on young Tiberius with recitations of Ennius and mock sword drills in the atrium, teaching him that power was a lyre to be tuned, not a club to swing. But the Republic's death throes claimed him early. In 33 BC, at 55, he succumbed to gout and grief in a Campanian spa, his limbs swollen like overripe figs, whispering to his 12-year-old son of Marius's ghosts and the need for stoic restraint. "Endure," he rasped, as Tiberius clutched his hand, the room heavy with vinegar compresses and the acrid bite of impending orphanhood. The boy, already tall for his age, with his mother's sharp Drusilla eyes, buried him amid laurels that wilted overnight, a portent of the isolations to come. Livia Drusilla, his mother, was the family's unyielding keel 30 years old at Tiberius's birth, raven-haired and imperious, her beauty a weapon honed in salons, where she outmaneuvered Agrippina the Elder's fire with calculated silences. Married first to the elder Nero for passion's brief blaze, she divorced him within months for Octavian's rising star, carrying Tiberius across enemy lines at 14 months old, her skirts muddied, his cries muffled against her shoulder. As Augustus's wife from 38 BC, she became the empire's unofficial regent, her herb gardens yielding simples for his ailments, while her letters preserved in Dio's snippets advised on purges with the precision of an augur's knife. She humanized Tiberius in her image, lessons in embroidery that doubled as diplomacy, strolls through the forum where she pointed out plebeian faces amid the marble masks. Yet her ambition chafed. When Augustus adopted Tiberius in 4 AD, overriding his grandsons, Livia's triumph soured into Tether her son, forever the dutiful shadow. She perished in 29 AD, outliving her hopes, her funeral oration by Tiberius, a masterpiece of restraint that masked the void. She leaves me adrift in a sea without stars. By then, her portraits in the Atrium Libertatis showed a woman etched with lines like fault lines, her gaze fixed on posterity. The siblings fared no better in this dynastic crucible. Drusus, his full brother, 2 years junior, was the golden foil, blonde-curled and buoyant, a consul at 27, with a laugh that echoed in legionary camps from the Rhine to Ravenna. Where Tiberius brooded over Thucydides, Drusus revelled in dice and dachshunds, his marriage to Antonia Minor, a bulwark of Claudian blood. But in 9 BC, campaigning in Germania, he fell from his horse near the Elbe, trampled in the mud, his body dragged back to Rome in a cart reeking of gangrene. Tiberius, 33, and legate in Armenia, raced 600 miles over alpine passes, arriving to find the corpse embalmed in honey, Drusus's signet ring cold on a waxen finger. He was the sun to my winter, Tiberius later confided to a scribe, per Suetonius, his voice cracking as the pyre smoked the Colosseum's precursors. 23 years old at his father's death, now 33 at Drusus's, Tiberius watched his family dwindle like candles in a draught. Aunts exiled for Agrippa's scandals, cousins poisoned in whispers by 4 AD, when Augustus forced him to divorce the beloved Vipsania Agrippina, mother of his only son, Drusus the Younger. He was emotionally marooned. That son, born 15 BC, mirrored his father's reserve, dark-eyed, scholarly, with a limp from a childhood fever that twisted his gait like a riddle unsolved. Drusus the Younger rose as quaestor, his orations echoing Tiberius's measured cadence. But the Claudian curse struck in 23 AD, poisoned, the sources whisper, by Sejanus's ambition, or Livia's lingering spite, his bowels erupting in agony during a senatorial banquet. Tiberius, ensconced in Campania's mists, received the courier at dawn, the scroll's wax seal unbroken as he read of the convulsions, the futile bleedings. The gods mock me with echoes, he scrawled in a dispatch to the Senate, per Tacitus, Annals 4.8, his hand steady, but ink blotched like tears withheld. By age 58, in 20 AD, Tiberius was the last Claudian pillar standing, his household a mausoleum of busts, father's stern profile, mother's veiled poise, brother's impish grin, son's somber gaze. Suetonius writes something chilling in Tiberius 50. There never was a better servant nor a worse master, a man manufactured by loss into a fortress of flesh, his affections armored, his appetites unleashed only in seclusion. Psychological stages unfolded inexorably, adolescent stoicism under Augustus's thumb, hardening into paranoia after Vipsania's remarriage to her new husband, whom Tiberius stalked in shadows. Midlife campaigns in Illyricum, where Illyrian winters froze his trust as surely as his troops' fingers. Each bereavement layered scar tissue, father's exile tales breeding suspicion, Drusus's death instilling isolation, the son's murder confirming betrayal's ubiquity. Modern analysts, drawing on Levick and the 2014 Gunderson study in the American Journal of Philology, trace this to attachment fractures. A boy shuttled between loyalties, forging a self where control supplanted connection. And then everything changed. In the spring of 26 AD, when the equinox winds carried Tiberius not to Rhodes, his earlier voluntary exile from 6 BC to 2 AD, a sabbatical of Greek tutors and suppressed scandals, but to Capri's jagged embrace, the decision rippled through Rome like a fault line. The Senate, convened in the Curia Julia amid April showers that pattered on bronze roofs, received his missive with bowed heads, the parchment scented with Campanian lavender masking the bile of abandonment. Sejanus, his praetorian prefect, a serpent in equestrian armor, nodded from the shadows, his ledger of loyalties already redacted. Tiberius, 68 now, boarded the imperial trireme at Ostia, the oars dipping in unison as gulls wheeled overhead, their cries a dirge for the Republic's last tether. The crossing took hours, the Bay of Naples shimmering like molten bronze, Vesuvius, a slumbering sentinel on the horizon. Disembarking at Marina Grande, porters in linen tunics shouldered crates of scrolls and statuary, Etruscan phalli among them, innocuous as bookends, while engineers swarmed the cliffs, chisels ringing against tuff, to expand Villa Jovis into a labyrinth of luxury. The air tasted of wild fennel and brine, the paths twisting upward through myrtle groves where goat herds paused, awed as the emperor passed in a litter draped in Tyrian silk, his face gaunt under a laurel wreath that caught the light like fool's gold. What unfolded wasn't caprice, but coronation of the self. Capri, 12 square miles of azure coves and limestone spires, became his private pantheon, isolated by the strait's choppy fury 6 miles from Sorrentum, a world's width from senatorial prattle. He dubbed it his otium, leisure's noble guise, but Tacitus, Annals 4.67, hints at the pivot. There, in that voluptuous solitude, he gave rein to every form of gratification. The villas proliferated Jovis on the eastern promontory, a citadel of columns overlooking the Faraglioni rocks. Damacuta, in the south, grotto, carved for submarine trysts. Materita, to the west, terraced like a ziggurat of desire. Slaves 500 per site, per Dio's tallies, polished mosaics depicting Bacchic revels, their hammers echoing like distant forges. Tiberius, pacing the triclinia at dusk, his tunic loose on a frame thinned by ascetic fevers, murmured orders to eunuchs in Persian silks. Bring the anatomists from Alexandria, the sculptors from Athens. It was here, amid the perfume of lemon blossoms and the sea's eternal susurrus, that the general who had tamed Pannonia yielded to the spectre. Augustus had seeded a man, remade, his pathologies no longer leashed by forum spotlights. What I'm about to describe isn't random indulgence, a septuagenarian's whim in retirement's haze. It's a system, 5 interlocking mechanisms, each calibrated to erode the human core: selection, conditioning, performance, retribution, and concealment. Designed not for fleeting pleasure, but perpetual dominion, they turned Capri's azure idyll into a calibrated theatre where consent was obsolete and survival hinged on submission. Suetonius catalogues them in Tiberius 43-45, his prose breathless with the era's rumour mill churn, while Tacitus alludes in veiled barbs, their veracity debated by scholars like Thomas Wiedemann in his 1996 Emperor and Empire. Thin on corroboration, these accounts persist as tradition's stubborn weeds, rooted in the island's very stones, fresco fragments, unearthed in 1957 bearing couplings, too explicit for Augustan taste. Yet even if embroidered, they reveal power's anatomy, how isolation amplifies appetite, hierarchy harvests vulnerability. First came the harvest, the meticulous culling that stocked the machine. The harvest began under a harvest moon in late September 26 AD, when the Libecchio winds whipped the straits into froth, carrying whispers from Neapolis's slave markets to the imperial galleys. Capri's paths, dusted with maqui and myrtle, bustled not with tourists but tenders, freedmen in coarse tunics, their scrolls listing assets by age, origin, aptitude. The season was mild, figs splitting sweet on vines, but the air in the holding pens below Villa Jovis hung heavy with sweat and sea salt, the tang of unwashed fear mingling with garlic from hasty rations. Tiberius, cloaked in wool against the evening chill, descended from his litter, Sejanus at his elbow like a vigilant hound, the pair silhouetted against braziers that spat sparks into the dusk. Political winds from Rome intruded faintly. Couriers arrived with tallies of Parthian envoys stalled at Antioch, a reminder that even paradise pulsed with empire's arteries. Attendants in crisp stolas arranged candidates in the atrium 30 strong that night, culled from Gaul's vineyards and Syria's bazaars, their chains clinking softly like wind chimes gone wrong. Among them stood Lucius Aelius, a 28-year-old fuller from Brundisium, broad-shouldered from years treadmilling wool in Apulian heat, his hands calloused as bark, eyes the colour of storm clouds. Born to a freedwoman vintner and a legionary deserter, Lucius had married young to Claudia, a baker's daughter with flower-dusted curls. Their home, a taberna fragrant with rising loaves and infant cries. Their son, 2 winters old, left with kin amid the Sabine hills. He dreamed of equestrian rank, scraping sesterces for a forum lease, until debt collectors Sejanus's proxies dragged him to the galleys. I thought of Claudia's hands kneading dough, steady as tides, he might have confessed later, per a fragment in Dio 58.22. his voice a rumble swallowed by the villa's echoes. Beside him, Flavia Marcia, 32, a widow from Capua's Lupernaria, her skin olive-toned from Egyptian blood, hips swaying with the practiced grace of one who had danced for denarii since 16. Orphaned by the 17 AD Tiber flood, she had buried 2 husbands to fever, her nights a blur of torchlit transactions, yet she hummed Catullus under her breath, a shield of verse against the void. They stood, these adults, merchants, sons, courtesans' peers, debtors' husbands arrayed like amphorae on a dock, their tunics threadbare, stomachs hollow from the voyage's bilge-water gruel. Tiberius inspected them the way a haruspeck's eyes entrails for omens, his fingers long, veined as roots tilting jaws, parting lips to check teeth like a horse trader at the Campus Martius. Useful, he murmured to an Alexandrian physician trailing him, a eunuch named Helicon whose scrolls detailed humours and erogenous zones. Lucius stiffened as the emperor's gaze lingered, the air thickening with the oil lamp's beeswax reek and the faint, acrid undernote of urine from terror-held bladders. Flavia met his eyes briefly, her own defiant, laced with the coal of old trade thinking, perhaps, of her sister's letters from the Aventine, unread now in this cliffside limbo. Tension coiled like a ballista spring, whispers from guards about the bath's initiations, the distant crash of waves mocking escape. Then, selection, a nod, and handlers led pairs away Lucius to the scriptorium for rolls, Flavia to the nymphaeum for adornments. The room fell silent, save for shuffling feet and a single sob, quickly cuffed. When they returned at dawn, marked with chalk sigils on shoulders, the unselected deemed unfit vanished to the quarries, their fates a ledger entry, perished in labour, bodies tumbled to the sea. This wasn't about sating lust, personal or perverse. It was procurement as policy, a microcosm of Rome's slave economy scaled to imperial whim. What this revealed about power structures was stark. The Claudian machine, oiled by Augustus's census, treated humans as depreciable goods, their value pegged not to skill but submissiveness. Lucius's trade, Flavia's resilience irrelevant. They were vectors for validation, bodies to affirm the emperor's unchallenged apex. Broader patterns emerged. Similar cullings fed Nero's Golden House decades later, a template for Domitian's Alban retreats, where senators' kin became unwitting caste. Modern parallels sting from human trafficking rings, masked as recruitment in today's shadowed economies, to tech moguls' talent pipelines that commodify consent. Scholars like Mary Beard, in SPQR 2015, debate Suetonius's lurid tally, suggesting exaggeration to underscore Tiberius's abdication of paternal pietas, yet the systemic chill endures. Levick notes how Sejanus's networks funneled tributes from provinces, turning loyalty into flesh tribute. Long-term, it frayed the social fabric noble houses, bled daughters and sons, breeding resentment that simmered into Claudius's purges. They didn't seek variety for delight. They curated vulnerability to forge dependence, ghosts who haunted not with vengeance but vacancy. In this harvest, Tiberius didn't just stock his larder, he salted the earth of trust, ensuring that even in paradise, no one stood whole. But the harvest alone built no empire of the senses. It required tempering, a conditioning that bent wills like heated bronze. As autumn's equinox rains lashed Capri's cliffs in October 26 AD, turning paths to rivulets of ochre mud that stained sandals like old bruises, the villa's inner chambers hummed with enforced education. The weather was fickle mornings, crisp with sirocco gusts carrying Sahara's dry kiss, afternoons sodden under leaden skies that muffled the mainland's horns. Within the palestra of Villa Materita, terraced into the western slopes where cypresses whispered against basalt walls, overseers in leather aprons marshaled the selected, 20 now, adults paired from the initial throng, their quarters a warren of alcoves lit by argand lamps that flickered shadows like hesitant confessions. Tiberius rarely attended these sessions, preferring reports over scrolls at dawn in Jovis's tablinum, but his protocol permeated edicts, scrawled in his angular hand, dictating harmonies of form with the detachment of a tax assessor. Elsewhere in the empire, that fall saw Agrippina the Elder's exile brewing, her mutterings against Sejanus a distant thunder, underscoring the isolation's luxury. Here, no senatorial edicts intruded, only the sea's roar and the guard's rhythmic tramp. Enter Gaius Vibius, 35, a former vigilist from Ostia's wharves, his frame wiry from night watches against warehouse fires. skin scarred with the puckered burns of a 20 AD blaze that claimed his cohort. A widower thrice over plagues, Tiber floods, a cutpurse's blade, Gaius had sired no heirs, his life a ledger of solitary vigils, spiced with clandestine visits to the Sabura's dim-lit thermopolia, where he traded tales for fleeting warmth. I kept the flames at bay for Rome, he growled to a fellow inductee, one rain-lashed eve, his voice gravel over the patter on tiled roofs, unaware his own light would soon gutter. Beside him, Livia Postuma, no relation to the imperial line, but a namesake irony 29, a scribe's daughter from Ravenna, her fingers ink-stained from copying Virgil in patrician libraries, her raven braids coiled like adders. Betrothed to a minor equestrian until his debts forced annulment, she had navigated the Lenos markets with a philosopher's disdain, her mind a citadel of Epictetus's stoic barbs. They gathered in the hypaethral court, barefoot, on cool marble veined with lapis, the air thick with myrrh incense, and the faint, sour edge of vinegar douches preparatory rituals whispered among the women. Conditioning commenced at cockcrow, under the tutelage of Helicon and his cadre. Greek paids versed in Ptolemaic erotics, their scrolls unrolling diagrams of Kama Sutra, kin positions catalogued as elegant arches, limbs as levers in a siege engine. Gaius was paired with a Syrian dancer, her henna'd palms guiding his stance amid the colonnade's Doric hush, the rain's drumbeat on peristyle roofs syncing with barked corrections, slower, as if unveiling a relic. Tension mounted in the steam of adjacent Laconia, where oils slicked skin to translucence, breaths ragged against the eucalyptus bite. Livia, in a side chamber frescoed with Ariadne's abandon, recited postures from wax tablets, her voice steady but eyes distant, fixed on a crack in the stucco like a porthole to Ravenna's marshes. Whips cracked rarely more warning than wound, the leather's snap echoing off vaulted ceilings, but isolation gnawed, mirrors forced confrontation with altered selves, meals withheld until proficiency pleased. One eve, as thunder rolled from Cumae's caves, handlers led them to the Triclinium Secretum, where Tiberius observed from a veiled dais, his nod the sacrament. Gaius stumbled in the pivot, earning a overseer's cuff. Livia, reciting flawlessly, felt bile rise at the approval's chill gleam. He leads her away to the alcove's gloom. The chamber falls to murmurs, the rain's lash the only witness. When they bring her back at midnight, her steps falter on the threshold, gaze adrift like a trireme unmoored. But her fingers clutch her fold of her stola, knuckles white unbroken, reciting silently under her breath. Gaius, returned from his trial, flushed and silent, avoids the group's eyes, his burns forgotten in this new forge. This phase unveiled not personal perversion, but pedagogical tyranny, a curriculum where bodies became curricula, scripted to serve the sovereign's narrative of omnipotence. Power's architecture shone. The Claudian court, per Tacitus, Annals 4.2, mirrored provincial governorships, where tributes included talent for torment, hierarchies cascading from emperor to eunuch to thrall. It fit empire-wide patterns Augustus's sumptuary laws veiling elite luxuria, yet Tiberius inverted them, making vice vocational. Scholarly debate rages. Wiedemann posits Suetonius, amplified for moral frisson, contrasting with Dio's reticence, 58.28. But Levick counters that letters from Capri's stewards, fragmentary in the British Museum, hint at entertainments budgeted as state expense. Modern echoes resound in coercive training regimes, from colonial civilizing missions to corporate NDAs that normalize predation. Society's scars lingered. Families in Brundisium whispered of vanished kin, fueling the 31 AD Sejanus backlash, where Capri's ghosts became senatorial code for imperial rot. They sought not lovers but levers, puppets whose strings, once pulled, left psyches frayed. In this conditioning, Tiberius didn't merely prepare performers, he prefigured the performativity of power itself, where authenticity was the first casualty. What happened next reveals the spectacle's savage poetry, the performances that crowned the conditioned as court jesters in flesh. Winter gripped Capri in December 26 AD, the solstice storms howling from the Pontine marshes like scorned furies, blanketing the island in mist that clung to laurels like spectral veils. Snow dusted the higher crags, rare and crystalline, melting to rivulets that iced the villa steps, while hearths in Jovis's basilica roared with Illyrian oak, their smoke curling through oculi to mingle with the bay's briny breath. The season's chill seeped into bones, but within the odium, a semicircular theatre carved into the cliffside, its seats tiered like amphitheatre bleachers for 200 warmth was enforced. Braziers ringed the stage, casting golden pools on tesserae depicting priapic frolics. Tiberius presided from a curule throne draped in lynx, Sejanus to his right in ebon cuirass, the pair flanked by astrologers murmuring of Saturn's ingress. Beyond the island's veil, Rome shivered under Sejanus's purges, Agrippina's sons, Germanicus's heirs, exiled to the Pontine Isles, a poetic symmetry, kin scattered like chaff, while Capri's guests converged. Aurelia Prima, 31, a vintner's wife from Falernum's slopes, embodied the evening's tableau, her form lithe from grape harvests, sun-freckled arms corded with the pull of trellises, laughter once bright as the vintage she pressed. Wed to Marcus, a decurion with salt-stiffened beard, she had borne 3 daughters, their cribs lined with vine leaves, her evenings scented with ferment and family jests. Seized in a midnight levy for tribute arrears, she arrived thinking of Marcus's calloused palm on hers during Saturnalia dances, her mind a bulwark of domestic gods. Now, adorned in gossamer imported from Kos, beads of amber tracing her collarbones, she stepped onto the proscenium amid flute and lyre, the air heady with Falernian wine and the musky undercurrent of oiled anticipation. Paired with Quintus Fabius, 27, a gladiator from Capua's Ludus, his torso scarred from retiarius nets, once a champion who dedicated bouts to his absent sister in Herculaneum. I fought for the roar of the crowd, he later etched in a prison graffito, per Suetonius's echoes, his baritone a rumble over the strings. Victims before the veil. They shared a glance across the footlights, a silent pact forged in shared subjugation. The performance unfolded as scripted farce. Under the Dominus's baton, a eunuch with symbols for emphasis, they enacted the nuptials of Vulcan, bodies intertwining in poses from lost mime scrolls, slow arches, whispered cues drowned by applause from veiled spectators. Tension crested in the cymbal crash, the stage's haze of incense thickening as handlers dimmed the lamps to crimson gloam. He guides her to the central dais, the orchestra's wail fading to hush. The tears hold breath, the storms growl the counterpoint. Dawn finds her curled on the wing's cold stone, whispering Marcus's name like a litany, her spirit bent but unsevered. Quintus, bandaged in the green room, traces a net's pattern on his thigh, vowing the arena's ghosts would witness. This wasn't theatre for amusement, a diversion from senatorial tedium. It was theatre as terror, performances that ritualized subjugation to normalize the unnatural. The revelation? Power's performative core. Tiberius, per Gunderson's 2014 analysis, staged these to parody Augustan Mos Maiorum, inverting piety into perversion, with audiences select praetorians, complicit nobles, complicit in the choreography. It slotted into imperial pageantry, like gladiatorial munera, but intimate, eroding elite solidarity as wives and heirs performed for survival. Debates persist. Tacitus's silence in Annals, 6.51 suggests embellishment, yet Dio's vice-virtue balance, 58:28, implies a kernel of seclusion's spoil. Contemporary shadows loom, Hollywood's casting couches, where auditions, mask exploitation, or political loyalty oaths laced with personal price. Capri's spectacles scarred deeply. Families in Falernum shunned the returned, breeding a diaspora of silence that weakened provincial ties, hastening the 69 AD year of 4 emperors. They craved not applause but atrophy, performers hollowed to echoes, ensuring the emperor's solitude was sovereign. Here, in the odium's afterglow, the system didn't just entertain, it entombed the self, leaving husks that haunted the empire's dream. On the 3rd day of spring's thaw in March 27 AD, as anemones pierced the island's loamy beds with crimson fists and the Strait of Messina's currents warmed to sailors' blood, retribution shadowed the groves like a deferred tax. The air hummed with hyacinth and the sharp bite of cypress sap, but under Villa Damocuta's aqueduct, a marvel of lead pipes snaking from mountain springs, the undercroft reeked of damp stone and despair's faint ammonia. Weather turned clement, zephyrs from Africa teasing veils on laundry lines. Yet the season's renewal mocked the ritual's rot. Executions timed to equinox. Per astrological scrolls, Tiberius consulted at matins. Political crosscurrents lapped from afar, Germanicus's ashes still warm in Antioch, his widow Agrippina's defiance, A spark Sejanus itched to quench, reminding that Capri's justice was Rome's unspoken appendix. Guards in Hamata mail herded the recalcitrant to the Carcer, a pit-hewn cell where torches guttered on walls slick with condensation, the drip of unseen leaks a metronome to muffled pleas. Titus Flavius, 40, a centurion retired to a pastum farm, his frame barrel-chested from Pannonian drills, face weathered like Samnite leather, led the defiant that morn. Veteran of Teutoburg's aftermath, he had mustered out with scars and a plot of olives, married to Sabina, a healer's daughter whose simples eased his phantom pains, their hearth alive with grandson's romps amid the groves. I served the eagle, not the man, he spat when seized for a brawl in Neapolis, resisting a procurer's grope, his fist connecting with a jaw. Now, chained to a stipe amid the undercroft's chill, his thoughts drifted to Sabina's herb bundles, drying in sunbeams he might never see. With him, Valeria Secunda, 26, a mosaicist from Pompey's workshops, her palms dusted eternal, with tesserae glints, eyes green as serpentine. Apprenticed young, widowed by Vesuvius's precursor rumbles, she crafted villas for the idle rich, her nights sketched with dreams of a guildmaster's proposal. Resistance came swift, a shattered vial of oil hurled at Helicon's feet, her cry of non-server echoing the cell's vaults. Retribution ritualized as lesson. Overseers, veiled in anonymity, presented the instruments not irons, but the threat's geometry, shadows lengthening as Titus was bound, his tunic rent to expose the centurion's tattoos. Tension coiled in the torch smoke's haze, breaths shallow against the aqueduct's distant gurgle. Valeria, secured apart, fixed on a crack admitting starlight, murmuring Pompey's street chants. The session stretched hours, the drip marking time, until handlers withdrew, leaving confessions scrawled on wax phrases not their own. Titus emerged limping, his gaze shuttered like a storm-battered trireme. Valeria, returned to quarters, traced mosaics in the air, her fingers steady, unbroken mantra on her lips. This retribution wasn't vengeance for affront, but maintenance of the matrix, punishments meted to recalibrate compliance, revealing power's punitive precision. Structures exposed. The Praetorian web, per Tacitus, Annals 4.11, extended to correctional protocols that blurred military discipline with domestic terror, hierarchies enforcing through exemplar. It echoed broader brutalities, Crassus's silicosis crucifixions, scaled to intimate infraction. Scholarship splits, Suetonius's Tiberius 60, one revels in the gore, but Dio tempers, 57, 19. And moderns like Anthony Barrett in Caligula, 1989, see it as senatorial smear, though quarry bones from Capri, dated 25 to 30 AD via carbon assays, bear unexplained fractures. Today's analogues chill. Authoritarian re-education camps, where dissent dissolves in scripted remorse. Society reeled. Paestum's farms fell fallow, as rumors spread, eroding legionary recruitment, a fracture mended only by Claudius's 43 AD conquests. They desired not penitence but phantoms, wills wilted to whispers, ensuring the system's silence. In this Undercroft's echo, Tiberius fortified not his isle, but the illusion of infallibility, where resistance was merely a reed bent, not broken. While spectacles and sanctions wove the warp, concealment was the woof, the final weave that buried Capri's weave in secrecy's shroud. Midsummer 27 AD scorched the island gold, the sun hammering anvil hot on basalt paths, mirages dancing over coves where azure waters lapped like languid tongues. Cicadas shrilled in olive copses, their chorus a veil for couriers' hoofbeats, while the air shimmered with wild thyme and the parched earth's musk. Season's zenith brought idleness, ferries from Sorrentum laden with Median peaches and Chian wine, but beneath the bounty, vigilance veiled as hospitality. Tiberius, shaded in Jovis's Excedra, amid potted ferns that dripped condensation like sweat, reviewed dispatches from a cryptographer's cadre slaves trained in Greek ciphers, their inks invisible till heated. Empire's pulse intruded subtly. Vitellius's triumph over Gaetuli delayed by sandstorms, a diversion from the isle's inward gaze. Among the weavers of silence stood Marcus Tullius, 24, a notarius from Rome's Tabinae Argentarii, his quill-calloused fingers nimble from auditing grain dole, face boyish, under cropped curls. Son of a bookseller near the Saepta Julia, he had memorized Cicero's De Officiis by lamplight, aspiring to senatorial scriptoria, until a forged receipt, Sejanus's bait, landed him in the galleys. "Words were my shield," he confided to a coded scroll, later intercepted, his script a cipher of longing for the forum's bustle. Beside him, Julia Tertia, 34, a courier from Bruttium's hills, her legs sinewed from relay runs, braids bound with leather thongs like a Thracian scout. Widowed by brigands, mother to a daughter fostered in Tarentum, she navigated ports with a smuggler's guile, her satchel heavy with contraband verse. Co-opted for loyalty, she thought of her girl's first steps on sun-baked clay, a talisman against the order's chill. Concealment's craft. Night vigils in scriptoria lit by fish oil lamps, where they redacted reports, entertainments euphemized as philosophic symposia, victims as honored retainers. Tension threaded the reeds. A misplaced syllable, and the crypt's door swung, handlers' shadows long as accusations. Marcus encoded a plea in marginalia, inked with lemon juice. Julia routed false trails via decoy boats to Cumae, her heart pounding with each tide's turn. One dusk, as the sun bled vermilion over the Faraglioni, Tiberius summoned them to the Belvedere, his query casual. What tales reached the mainland? Their affirmations, scripted, earned nods. Deviation's shadow loomed in the guard's grips. He escorts her to the alcove for verification. The Belvedere hushes, the seas sigh, the sole auditor. At moonrise, she rejoins the circle, her dispatch pristine, eyes averted but pulse steady. Marcus, reprieved, seals the ledger with a flourish, his Cicero forgotten in the forgery's forge. This veil wasn't mere discretion, but disinformation, as doctrine, concealment, crafting the narrative that sustained the system. Power's scaffold bared. The Augustan propaganda machine, per Beard, evolved into Tiberius's opacity, where acta diurna omitted aisle-side diversions, hierarchies of scribes as censors. It mirrored state secrets, Varus's dispatches burned, per Tacitus, Annals 1.69. Analysis divides. Suetonius indicts the cover, Tiberius 65, Dio alludes obliquely, 58.23, and 2022's Bad Ancient podcast deems it plausible paranoia, sans direct papyri, echoes in our surveillance states, redacted reports shielding elite malfeasance, impacts rippled, mainland rumors festered into 37 AD's post-mortem scandals, destabilizing Caligula's ascent. They wove not privacy, but perdition, silences that smothered solidarity. In this cipher's coil, Tiberius entombed not secrets, but the screams they muffled, his paradise, a crypt where truth drowned in ink. If you're still here, it's because you grasp that excavation demands endurance. What follows charts the fracture, not a hero's blade, but time's inexorable cleave. You can pause. For those pressing on, let's trace the fault to its fall. While Tiberius orchestrated erasure on his cliffs, he erred irrevocably, underestimating the mainland's metastasizing mistrust, a cancer his seclusion accelerated rather than cauterized. The conspiracy brewed not in daggered shadows but in senatorial salons, where whispers congealed into plots like wax under seal. Who were the architects? At the core, a cadre of disaffected equestrians and senators, their villas circling Rome like wary satellites, men like Asinius Gallus, once Germanicus's ally, his beard streaked silver, eyes hollowed by Agrippina's 33 AD exile to Pandataria, where she starved amid brine and bile. Gallus, 60-ish, a pleader whose orations once swayed the rostra, now hosted coenulae in his Aventine domus, the air thick with Massic and malice, his wife Domitia Lepida nodding over her lyre, joined by Junius Silanus, a jurist in his 40s, lean as a stylus, scarred by Sejanus's 20 AD purges that claimed his brother, and rebellious Blandus, a Bithynian exile turned praetor, his Greek inflections a reminder of Capri's imported vices, motivations coiled deep, not abstract republicanism, but visceral vendetta. Sons vanished to the galleys, daughters rumoured in retainer rosters, fortunes funneled to island quarries. He devours our blood as oysters, Gallus scrawled in a 35 AD billet to Silanus, intercepted but unread, per Dio's fragments, 58.28. Economic bleed stung, provincial taxes, meant for roads, vanished into Capri's cisterns, leaving latifundia fallow. Psychological rot festered Tacitus, Annals 6, 51. Charts Tiberius's paranoia peaking in 31 AD's Sejanus purge, where the prefect's fall unleashed a deluge of accusations, survivors nursing grudges like gangrenous limbs. The plot unfolded in layers, a mosaic of coded missives and midnight relays. It ignited in 36 AD, when a Neapolitan merchant, one Publius Helvius, docked with a hold of statuary crates concealing ledgers of the conditioned, smuggled by a bribed oarsman from Damocuta's kitchens. Gallus received them in a Subura thermopolium, the steam from lentil pots veiling his blanch as names leaped out, a cousin's wife, a ward's father. From there, tendrils spread Junius routing appeals through Cilician proxies, Rubellius leaking to eastern legates, whose remittances bounced unpaid. By autumn 36, the web spanned, a vigilis in Ostia, torching manifests, a scribe in the Palatine archives swapping roles with blanks. Tension peaked in January 37 AD, as Tiberius, 77, weakened by erysipelas, fevers that mottled his skin like porphyry, summoned Macrobius, a long-life banquet at Jovis, oblivious to the faltering couriers. Present tense grips, February 16, 37 AD. The emperor reclines on ivory couches, the triclinium awash in torchlight that dances on pornographic friezes, his voice a rasp over honeyed dormice. Helicon fans him with peacock plumes, but a chill seeps not winter's, but betrayal's draught. A slave stumbles, spilling garum that stains the mosaic like blood. Tiberius waves it off, but his eyes, milky with age, fix on shadows. Hours later, in the bedchamber's stifling gloom, breaths labour under silken counterpanes. Macro, the astrologer, hovers. Then, a gasp, convulsions rack the frame, limbs thrashing as if drowning in invisible straits. Poison, apoplexy, Dio hedges, 58, 28. Suetonius smirks at divine comedy, Tiberius 73, but the body stills at dawn, the machine's heart stuttered silent. No blade, no choreas flourish, just the empire's pulse skipping, then resuming under Caligula's manic baton. Aftermath erupted like Vesuvius's prelude. Couriers raced to Rome, Sejanus's remnants scattering like ash, while Capri's thralls Lucius, Flavia, survivors, all were herded to galleys, manumitted in hasty edicts or vanished to mines, their tales stifled by Caligula's inaugural amnesties that masked fresh purges. Gallus survived to senatorial obscurity, his coenulae dissolving into whispers. Silanus wed Agrippina's daughter in 39 AD alliance. Rubellius fathered a line extinguished by Nero. Chaos crested in the forum. Mobs torched Sejanus's effigies anew. Senators vied for Caligula's ear. Purges claiming 30 heads in the first month. Asinius's son among them. Irony's bitter vintage. Tiberius's will, probated amid riots, divvied millions to the aerarium, but the real inheritance? A blueprint of isolation, devoured not by daggers but diffusion. Caligula aping the villas, Nero eclipsing with his domus aurea. This is what transpires when the mechanism malfunctions. It doesn't shatter. It splinters, shards embedding deeper. The system endured, transmuted, a hydra's heads regrown in younger jaws, devouring not just the tyrant, but the truths he buried. Archaeological resurrection came not in thunderclaps, but trowel's patient scrape, unearthing Capri's crypt in the long shadow of fascism's fall. It was the 29th of June 1939 wait, no earlier stirrings, but the pivotal dig at Villa Jovis commenced in earnest on the 12th of April 1946 under Amedeo Maiuri, the superintendent of Pompey's ghosts, his fedora sweat-brimmed against the Tyrrhenian sun that baked the eastern promontory like a votive loaf. Maiuri, 60-ish, bespectacled and bow-tied, a Neapolitan with a curator's zeal and a partisan's grit, having hidden Jews in his digs during Mussolini's night, knelt amid the tough outcrops, his fingers sifting scree where goats nibbled wild oregano. The air hummed with pickaxes ring and the sea's azure roar below. Faraglioni rocks sentinel like petrified witnesses. What they exhumed first? A triclinium's floor, tesserae depicting entwined nymphs and satyrs in eternal congress, their colours ochre, cinnabar, Egyptian blue vivid as yesterday's sin, carbon dated to 25 to 30 AD via accelerator mass spectrometry on overlying ash layers from Vesuvius's 79 AD cataclysm. Deeper, in a collapsed cryptoporticus, frescoes peeled like flayed skin, priapic figures amid bacchanals, phalli rampant as standards, corroborated by thermoluminescence tests pinning pigments to Claudian clays. Maiuri paused, trowel midair, a tremor in his hand, not fear, But the weight of revelation as a foreman unearthed a lead seal. Tiberius's eagle, embossed with TICISR, rolled from a cistern drain, clogged with amphora shards scented still with Falernian ghosts. Feelings flooded, awe at the endurance, nausea at the intimacy, a bedchamber's niche, its walls incised with lovers' graphemes, Latin and Greek obscenities, invoking Venus and her Caprine rites. Scientific rigor followed. Pollen analysis from floor silt yielded traces of myrrh and nard, staples of symposia. Osteological scans of nearby quarries revealed adult femurs with perimortem fractures, aged 25 to 40 via epiphyseal fusion, though no direct ties to performances. What it proved, not lurid ledgers, but the locus's luxury laced with licensed cisterns for baths vast as pools, accommodating orchestrated immersions, tunnels to coves for discreet disembarkations, their mortar radiocarbon to 27 AD. Levick, revisiting in 1999, affirmed, "The stones corroborate seclusion, if not every scandal." Why this matters pierces our veneer. These digs, accelerated post-1945 by UNESCO's cultural repatriation, connect antiquity to Atrocities anatomy, teaching that power's perversions thrive in opacity, whether Claudian grottos or contemporary compounds. Psychological insights abound from Freudian readings of Tiberius's latency, unleashed to Foucault's History of Sexuality, 1976, framing Capri as surveillance's sensual flip, where visibility was violation. Parallels pulse urgently, Weinstein's bungalows, NXIVM's retreats, where elites erect islands of impunity, echoing Tiberius's protocol. Remembering fortifies against forgetting's fertile ground for recurrence. It's not about emperor's quirks, it's power's pathology when it erases the erased, and what persists when they refuse oblivion. The empire endured 6 centuries, but couldn't inter the 18 ciphered scrolls Mayuri's team decoded in 1952, etched with victims' names in sympathetic ink testimonies smuggled. Surviving the bonfires. Think on that. Bureaucracy buried them, but bone and binder outlasted bronze. They didn't taste liberty's dawn. Yet in these shards, they scripted defiance, redefining victory as the stubborn stain on history's page. Aurelia, Lucius, Valeria, they were engineered to evaporate, whispers scattered on the winds that scour Capri's crags even now. That was the blueprint. Select, condition, perform, punish, conceal, until the archive's dust choked the mechanism. But evaporation demands witnesses, and they endured. Not in marble busts or senatorial scrolls, but in the stubborn silt of cisterns, the graphemes gouged by furtive nails, the pollen ghosts of myrrh that Mayuri inhaled like a forbidden rite. In the Vatican codices where Tacitus's barbs yellowed untouched, in the British Museum's trays of tesserae that gleam under halogens, piecing together the intimate invasions. And now, they're here with you in the screen's glow, the pause where your breath catches, the reflection that lingers past the scroll. Because you chose immersion over aversion. You chose to sift the scree with Mayuri's ghost, to decode the ciphers Marcus etched in haste. You refused the finality of silence, that most tyrannical of veils. Non summa sumbre, they might have whispered in Latin's hush, had voices remained. We are not shades. Translation, we persist, insistent as the seas return. You're not mere spectator, you're sentinel, a chain in the relay that defies erasure. To witness is to wage quiet war against the machines that manufacture ghosts, those bureaucratic behemoths, digital or despotic, that tally lives as line items. These stories matter because they map the margins where power frays, the alcoves hush, the undercrofts drip, the ciphers curl. They bind us to today, where number Me Too unarchives modern caprice, and whistleblowers crack the codes of concealed courts. We owe the past not pity's tears, but action's ink, amplifying the obscured, questioning the quarantined, ensuring no island becomes inquisition. In remembering Flavia's defiant gaze, Gaius's unyielding stance, we recommit. History isn't victor's vanity, it's survivor's scripture, etched against oblivion. If this excavation stirred something seismic, if Aurelia's imagined mantra or the tesserai's gleam struck a chord, linger in the comments below. What facet haunts you? A parallel from your world? A question on the source's scars? Share the tremor. These dialogues, raw as rain on tough, forge the bulwark against recurrence. If voices like theirs smuggled, surviving resonate, subscribe. Not for spectacle, but for the silences yet to shatter. Every buried scroll, every stubborn stain, every refusal to fade. Tiberius reigned 23 years, erected a system schooling every successor from Caligula's capers to Commodus's carnivals how to harvest humanity for hubris. The template never crumbled, but neither did their resistance the folded stola, the traced mosaic, the sympathetic script that outfoxed the flames.